Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the biggest truth. When you've worked your whole life to build something meaningful, the thought of someone stealing it can stop your heart. Noah Carter stood in his corner office, phone pressed to his ear, closing the deal that would save hundreds of jobs. Then a small hand tugged his sleeve. 8-year-old Zoe, the janitor's daughter, looked up with serious eyes and whispered 5. Words that changed everything. "Your phone is tapped, mister." Noah's blood ran cold. Someone was listening to every word, stealing his plans, preparing to destroy what he'd spent decades building. But how did this little girl know what his security team had missed? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Noah Carter's hands trembled as he set the phone back in its cradle. The little girl's words echoed in his mind like a warning bell from his past, from the days when a single mistake could mean no food on the table. He'd come too far to lose it all now. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, the city sprawled before him in the evening light. 35 years ago, he'd stood in this same spot not as CEO, but as a 22-year-old maintenance worker cleaning these very windows for minimum wage. His father had worked in the machine shop downstairs, cutting metal until his hands were permanently stained with grease. "Build something that matters, son," the old man had said on his deathbed. "Something that lasts longer than you." Carter Industries had become that something. What started as a small machine shop had grown into a manufacturing empire, employing 1,200 people across 3 facilities. Not tech workers or consultants, real people who worked with their hands, who drove pickup trucks and worried about mortgage payments and their kids' college funds. People like Noah used to be. People like his father. The leather folder on his desk held their future. The merger documents with Hato Corporation would inject $40 million into the company, enough to modernize the factories, guarantee jobs for the next decade, and maybe even expand. The Japanese had been impressed with Carter Industries' precision manufacturing, their ability to produce components that met aerospace standards. After 2 years of negotiations, they were ready to sign tomorrow. The signing was tomorrow at noon. Noah picked up the folder, feeling its weight. Inside were confidentiality agreements, technical specifications, profit projections, everything a competitor would need to undercut the deal or sabotage the merger. His stomach churned. How long had someone been listening? How much did they know? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Maria Gutierrez peered around the door, her cleaning cart visible in the hallway. "Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry about Zoe. She shouldn't bother you. I tell her to stay in the break room, but she's curious about everything." "It's fine, Maria." Noah studied the woman who'd cleaned his office for 6 years. Single mother, worked 2 jobs, never complained. He'd made sure she had health insurance and a decent wage, but he'd never really seen her until now. "Your daughter," she said something interesting. Maria's face flushed. "She has very good ears, Mr. Carter. Too good sometimes. The doctors say she hears things others don't, like a superpower, but—" She shrugged, the gesture carrying the weight of medical bills and special accommodations a janitor's salary couldn't cover. "Where is she now? In the break room? I'll get her." "No." Noah stood, his decision made. "I'll come to her." As they walked through the executive floor, Noah noticed things he'd overlooked for years. The hum of fluorescent lights, the whisper of air conditioning, the faint buzz from the server room 2 floors down. Had these sounds always been there? Or was he just now learning to listen? The break room smelled of reheated coffee and industrial disinfectant. Zoe sat at a round table, her feet swinging above the floor, drawing in a purple notebook. She looked up as they entered, her dark eyes serious behind thick glasses. "Hello again, Mr. Carter." Noah sat across from her, feeling oversized in the small chair. "Zoe, what you said about my phone. How did you know? She tilted her head, considering. It sounds wrong. Like when our TV at home gets interference from the neighbor's radio. A tiny buzz underneath the regular sounds. I tried to tell the security man last week, but he said I was being silly. Last week, Noah's blood chilled. The preliminary negotiations had started last week. Which phones sound wrong, Zoe? Lots of them. Yours, Mr. Pemberton's, Ms. Chun in accounting. She returned to her drawing. The buzz is loudest on the important phones. The important phones. The executives involved in the merger. Someone had been listening to everything, mapping their strategy, learning their weaknesses. But who, and more importantly, why? Noah thought of Apex Corporation, their biggest rival. Run by David Sterling, a man who collected companies like trophies and stripped them for parts. Sterling had tried to buy Carter Industries 3 years ago, offering pennies on the dollar. When Noah refused, Sterling had smiled coldly and said, "Everything's for sale, Carter. It's just a matter of finding the right pressure point." Had Sterling found that pressure point? "Zoe," Noah said carefully, "would you help me listen? I need to understand what you're hearing." The little girl looked at her mother, who nodded slowly. "Okay, Mr. Carter, but you have to promise something." "What's that?" "When we find the bad sound, you'll make it stop. It hurts my ears." Noah extended his hand to shake on it, treating her like the professional she was about to become. Deal. Zoe Martinez had been different from the moment she was born. The doctors called it hyperacusis at first, then auditory processing sensitivity, then gave up trying to label it. Maria just called it her daughter's gift, even when that gift meant. Zoe couldn't attend regular school because the cacophony of 30 children overwhelmed her. The purple notebooks spread before. Noah was filled with what Zoe called sound pictures. Wavy lines for the coffee maker's gurgle, sharp peaks for the elevator's ding, gentle curves for her mother's humming. Each page documented the acoustic landscape of Carter Industries' executive floor, drawn by an 8-year-old who experienced the world through frequencies others couldn't perceive. This one, Zoe pointed to a jagged pattern like a seismograph recording, is your phone when someone calls? Let's see here. Her small finger traced a series of tiny dots beneath the main pattern. This shouldn't be there. It's like someone else is listening too. Maria stood by the break room door, worn hands twisting her cleaning rag. Zoe started coming with me 2 months ago. Her after-school program ended, and I couldn't afford. She stopped, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. It's okay, Mama, Zoe said without looking up. I like it here. It's quieter than school. Noah studied mother and daughter, seeing them clearly for the first time. Maria worked the 5 to midnight shift, allowing her to drop Zoe at school and good morning. But when school ended at 3, the girl had nowhere to go until 5. So she came here, to the executive floor of a billion-dollar company, and sat quietly drawing sounds while her mother prepared for her shift. How long have you been keeping these notebooks? Noah asked. Since I was 5. I have 17 at home. Zoe flipped back through pages. This is from last month. See how the pattern changed? That's when the wrong sound started. Last month, just after the first Japanese delegation visit. Zoe, I need to understand something, Noah said carefully. Can you hear all electronic signals, or just certain ones? The girl pushed her glasses up her nose, a gesture that made her look like a tiny professor. Not all. But phones are easy because they're meant to carry sound. The bad buzz is different from normal phone electricity. It's sneakier. Noah would have smiled if the situation weren't so serious. Mr. Carter, Maria stepped forward. I know Zoe sometimes says things that sound strange, but she's never wrong about sounds. Never. When she was 4, she heard a gas leak in our apartment building 3 days before it was detected. She saved lives. Noah believed it. In his experience, The most valuable insights often came from unexpected sources. His own father, with an 8th-grade education, had invented a manufacturing process that became the foundation of Carter Industries. Why couldn't an 8-year-old with extraordinary hearing detect corporate espionage? "I want to hire you both," Noah said suddenly. Maria's eyes widened. "Sir? Not for cleaning. As consultants. Temporary security consultants. Maria, I need someone I can trust, someone who's been invisible in these offices for years. And Zoe, I need your ears." He pulled out his phone, then stopped. If Zoe was right, using it would alert whoever was listening. "We'll work out the details later. For now, I need you both to help me understand the scope of this." Zoe closed her notebook carefully. "Mr. Carter, there's something else. The bad sounds aren't just in the phones. They're in the walls, too. In the conference room especially. The conference room, where tomorrow's signing would take place." "Show me," Noah said. They walked down the hallway, Zoe leading like a tiny detective. She paused outside the main conference room, head tilted, listening to something Noah couldn't hear. The room was dark, but city lights filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished table where million-dollar deals were made and broken. "Here," Zoe whispered, pointing to a spot near the head of the table. "And here," the credenza where coffee was served. "And here," the speakerphone in the table's center. 3 listening devices in the room where the most sensitive discussions took place. Noah felt like he was standing in a minefield, only now realizing how many steps he'd already taken. "Zoe," he said quietly, "can you tell how long these have been here?" She listened intently, then shook her head. "Longer than the phones. Maybe 6 months?" "The sound is settled, like dust. 6 months. Long before the merger talks began. Someone had been playing a very long game, gathering intelligence, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Tomorrow's signing would be that moment, unless Noah could turn the tables. "I need to ask you both a very important question," Noah said. "Are you willing to help me catch whoever is doing this? It might be dangerous. It will definitely be difficult. But I can't do it alone, and I can't trust anyone else." Maria and Zoe exchanged glances. The mother's fear warred with something else, pride, perhaps, that someone finally saw her daughter's gift as valuable rather than strange. "We'll help," Maria said firmly. "Won't we, Mia?" Zoe nodded solemnly. "The bad sounds need to stop. They're wrong." Noah felt a surge of hope. David might defeat Goliath after all, especially when David had superhuman hearing and a mother's fierce protection. "Then let's get to work," he said. "We have less than 20 hours to save 1,200 jobs." Noah's first instinct was to call security. His hand moved toward his desk phone, then froze. If Zoe was right, every word would be transmitted to whoever was orchestrating this surveillance. Instead, he pulled out a legal pad and wrote, "We need to examine the phone without alerting anyone." Zoe read the note and nodded approvingly. "Like spy movies," she whispered. The executive floor was nearly empty at 7 in the evening. Most of the staff had gone home to families and dinner tables, leaving behind only the ghosts of corporate ambition and the soft hum of sleeping computers. Noah led his unlikely team back to his office, where the phone sat innocuously on his desk, a standard multi-line unit that had been there since his last office renovation 3 years ago. "How do we check it without them knowing?" Maria asked, her voice barely audible. Noah had an idea. He pulled out his personal cell phone and typed a text to Jim Hawthorne, his head of security. "Notice strange static on my office line. Could be nothing, but the Japanese are particular about communication quality. Can you have someone check it first thing tomorrow?" The response came quickly. "Probably just the old wiring. Building's due for an upgrade. I'll have maintenance look at it in the morning." Noah showed the text to Maria and Zoe, then wrote on his pad. He dismissed it too quickly. Didn't even offer to check tonight. Zoe had moved closer to the desk, circling the phone like a cat stalking prey. She pointed to the handset, then made a twisting motion with her small hands. Noah understood. He carefully lifted the handset and began unscrewing the earpiece cover. The device was smaller than a fingernail, nestled against the speaker like a parasitic insect. Sophisticated, professional, and definitely not something that belonged in any legitimate phone system. Noah's hands shook as he photographed it with his cell phone, making sure to capture every angle. "There's more," Zoe whispered, pointing to the base unit. Working methodically, they found 3 more devices, one in the base, one attached to the line cord, and one that seemed to be intercepting the data connection. Whoever had done this wanted to capture everything. Voice calls, conference calls, even the digital communications that passed through the phone's data port. Maria had been keeping watch by the door. Now she turned, her face grave. "Mr. Carter, who would know enough to do this? Someone had to get into your office, spend time here. Someone with access," Noah wrote. Security, maintenance, or... He stopped writing as a terrible thought occurred to him. The office renovation 3 years ago. His phone had been replaced then, along with all the executive communication systems. The work had been overseen by Richard, he breathed. Richard Stern, his CFO for 15 years. Richard, who'd been with him since the early days, who knew every detail of the company's finances, who'd pushed hard for the office renovation, claiming they needed to modernize their communications to attract international partners. "Mr. Carter?" Maria noticed his distress. Noah forced himself to think logically. Richard had access, opportunity, and knowledge. But motive? The man was well paid, had stock options, stood to benefit from the merger. "Unless I need to check something," Noah wrote. He moved to his computer, then stopped. If the phones were compromised, what about the computers? He looked at Zoe helplessly. She understood immediately, moving to his desk and listening intently to the computer tower. After a moment, she shook her head. "This sounds normal. Just regular computer noise." Relief flooded through Noah as he logged into the financial systems. He pulled up Richard's recent stock transactions, expense reports, travel records. Everything looked normal until he checked the secondary signatures on company credit accounts. 6 months ago, Richard had authorized a new corporate card. The charges were mundane office supplies, business lunches, but the authorization signature wasn't Richard's usual flourish. It was careful, practiced, like someone trying too hard to forge authenticity. "Zoe," Noah said quietly, "you mentioned other phones sounding wrong. Mr. Pemberton's?" "Yes, and Ms. Chun in the conference room, and Mr. Stern's." Noah's blood chilled. Richard's phone was bugged too. He wasn't the perpetrator, he was another victim. Someone was listening to all of them, gathering intelligence on every aspect of the merger. A soft knock at the door made them all freeze. Through the frosted glass, Noah could see a familiar silhouette. Richard Stern stood in the hallway, briefcase in hand. "Noah, I saw your light on. Working late on the eve of the big day?" Noah moved quickly, closing the phone's casing and sliding the components into his desk drawer. He gestured for Maria to resume cleaning and for Zoe to sit quietly with her notebook. "Come in, Richard." His CFO entered, looking tired and older than his 55 years. "Just wanted to go over the final numbers one more time. The Japanese are sticklers for detail, and..." He paused, noticing Maria and Zoe. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "Maria's daughter," Noah said casually, keeping her mom company during the shift. Richard barely glanced at them, dismissing them as part of the invisible workforce that kept the building running. It was a blindness Noah recognized because he'd shared it until an hour ago. "The numbers are solid," Noah said, moving to block Richard's view of his desk. "We're ready. Good, good." Richard shifted his weight, something unreadable in his expression. Noah, I've been meaning to ask, have you noticed anything strange lately? Calls dropping, odd echoes on the line? Noah's pulse quickened. Why do you ask? It's probably nothing. Paranoia before a big deal. But sometimes I feel like he shook his head. Like I said, probably nothing. Get some rest, Noah. Tomorrow changes everything. After Richard left, Noah slumped in his chair. His CFO knew something was wrong, but was too afraid or too compromised to speak up. The conspiracy was deeper than corporate espionage. It was a web of surveillance that had trapped them all. Mr. Carter, Zoe said softly, that man is scared. I could hear it in his voice, the shaky parts underneath the words. Out of the mouths of babes, Noah thought. He looked at his unexpected allies, a janitor and her extraordinary daughter, and made a decision that would have seemed insane an hour ago. We need help, he said, and we need to be very careful who we trust. The night shift at Carter Industries operated in a different world from the daytime corporate machine. While executives worried about profit margins and market share upstairs, a skeleton crew kept the digital heart of the company beating. Noah had walked these halls during off hours before, but never really seen the people who worked them. Tonight, that blindness would end. Marcus Chon hunched over his workstation in the IT department, surrounded by 3 monitors displaying cascading lines of code. He didn't look up when Noah, Maria, and Zoe entered, just raised one hand in acknowledgement while continuing to type with the other. Give me 30 seconds, Marcus muttered. If I don't close this loop, the backup servers will throw errors all night. Noah waited, studying the 28-year-old who'd been flagged as a troublemaker by management. Marcus had reported suspicious network activity 3 times in the past month, each report dismissed as paranoia or overzealousness. Now Noah wondered if the dismissals had been intentional. There. Marcus spun in his chair, then froze when he saw his CEO. Mr. Carter, is there a problem with the systems? Yes, Noah said simply. But not the kind you're thinking of. We need your help, and we need to know if you can keep a secret. Marcus's eyes sharpened behind wire-rimmed glasses. Is this about the anomalies I've been reporting? What anomalies? Data packets routing through unauthorized servers. Encrypted transmissions during off hours. Someone's been siphoning information from our network for months, but every time I report it, security says it's normal traffic. Marcus pulled up a screen filled with network logs. Look at this. See these spikes? They correspond exactly with executive phone usage. Zoe moved closer to the monitors, tilting her head. The computers make the same wrong sound as the phones, she announced. Marcus looked at the child in surprise, then at Noah. Who is she? Our secret weapon, Noah said. He quickly explained what they'd discovered, watching Marcus's expression shift from confusion to understanding to anger. Those bastards, Marcus breathed. I knew something was wrong. The patterns were too regular, too targeted. But who would? He stopped, fingers flying over his keyboard. Wait. If they're transmitting data, I can trace the destination. Give me 10 minutes. While Marcus worked, Noah made another decision. We need one more person. Someone who understands the physical infrastructure. Maria spoke up quietly. Harald Kowalski. He's the night maintenance supervisor. Used to work for the phone company for 40 years before he retired. He does part-time work here now. Noah knew the name vaguely, an older man who'd been hired for his expertise in legacy systems. Can you find him? Maria nodded and disappeared into the hallway. She returned 5 minutes later with a man in his 70s, wearing a faded work shirt and carrying a toolbox that looked older than Marcus. Harold Kowalski had the weathered hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime working with wires and circuits. Mrs. Gutierrez says you've got a problem with the phones, Harold said. His Polish accent still noticeable after decades in America. I told management 6 months ago the communication system was compromised. They said I was behind the times, didn't understand modern technology. He snorted. I've forgotten more about phone systems than these kids ever learned. Noah felt a pattern emerging. Everyone who'd noticed something wrong had been ignored, dismissed, or marginalized. The night shift workers, the janitor's daughter, the veteran technician, all invisible to the corporate power structure, and therefore able to see what others missed. Got something, Marcus announced. The transmissions are going to a server, registered to a company called Pinnacle Communications. But here's the interesting part. Pinnacle is a shell company, incorporated 6 months ago. No real address, no employees except... He pulled up another screen. The only listed officer is a lawyer who specializes in corporate acquisitions for Apex Corporation. Apex, David Sterling's company. The pieces were falling into place. Mr. Kowalski, Noah said, can you trace the physical bugs back to their source? Harold's weathered face creased in a smile. Son, I was tracing wiretaps when you were in diapers. Give me 20 minutes and a cup of coffee. I'll find where your leak starts. They made an odd procession through the building's bowels. A CEO, a janitor, an 8-year-old girl, a rebellious IT worker, and a septuagenarian phone technician. Harold led them to a maintenance room in the sub-basement that Noah hadn't known existed. The walls were lined with junction boxes, cable runs, and telephone cross-connects dating back decades. Here's your problem, Harold said, pointing to a series of modern devices spliced into the older wiring. Someone did professional work here. These are signal splitters, feeding everything from the executive floor to... He traced the wires with practiced ease. This secondary panel, which isn't supposed to exist. Marcus had brought a laptop and was already scanning for wireless signals. There's a hidden transmitter here. It's collecting everything from the taps and broadcasting it via cellular connection. Clever setup. Even if we found the phone bugs, we might miss this. Can we disable it? Noah asked. Sure, Harold said, but then they'll know we're on to them. Noah checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. In 14 hours, the Japanese delegation would arrive for the signing. If Apex knew their surveillance was compromised, they'd accelerate whatever plan they had in motion. There's another problem, Marcus said quietly. I've been going through the transmission logs. They don't just have our phone calls. They have emails, financial data, even personnel files. Mr. Carter, they know everything about this merger. Every detail, every strategy, every fallback position. The weight of the betrayal settled on Noah's shoulders. 6 months of preparation, countless hours of negotiation, the futures of 1,200 families, all compromised by David Sterling's corporate espionage. We could call the FBI, Maria suggested. With what proof? Noah replied. Devices that will mysteriously disappear the moment we report them. Data transmissions to shell companies? Sterling has an army of lawyers. By the time we proved anything, the merger would be dead and the company gutted. So what do we do? Marcus asked. Noah looked at his unlikely teen people who'd been overlooked, ignored, dismissed as unimportant. People who'd seen the truth. Because they were invisible to those in power. We beat them at their own game, he said. They think they know everything about our plans, so we're going to give them new plans to know. False ones. Zoe, who'd been quietly drawing in her notebook, looked up. Like telling lies to catch liars? Exactly like that, Noah said. But first, we need to know how deep this goes. Harold, can you trace every single tap in the building? Marcus, can you identify every compromised system? Maria, I need you to quietly check which executives are working late tonight. And Zoe, the little girl straightened attentively. I need you to keep listening. You're the only one who can hear what the rest of us miss. As his team dispersed to their tasks, Noah felt something he hadn't experienced since his early days building the company. The thrill of fighting against impossible odds with people who believed in something bigger than themselves. David Sterling had every advantage except one. He'd never imagined that the invisible people, the night shift workers he'd never notice, would be the ones to bring him down. Harold Kowalski's maintenance room became their command center. The old technician had spread his hand-drawn schematics across a folding table, 40 years of institutional knowledge, rendered in pencil on yellowing paper. The official building blueprints showed neat, orderly communication pathways. Harold's maps revealed the truth, a labyrinth of additions, modifications, and forgotten connections that told the real story of the building's electronic nervous system. See this? Harold traced a line with one gnarled finger. Original Bell System installation, 1963. Solid copper, built to last forever. And here, he pointed to another section, digital upgrade, 1995. They didn't remove the old system, just built on top of it. Then another upgrade in 2008, and another 3 years ago. The renovation, Noah said. Exactly, but look what they did. Harold pulled out a magnifying glass, examining his own drawings. They didn't just modernize, they added redundant pathways, extra junction boxes. More than any office would need. At the time, I thought they were future-proofing. Now it looks like they were building a surveillance network, Marcus finished. He'd set up his laptop on a makeshift desk, running trace programs on the compromised systems. Mr. Carter, this is worse than we thought. It's not just the executive floor. I'm finding anomalies in accounting, legal, R&D, even human resources. Zoe sat cross-legged on the floor, her notebook open to a fresh page. She'd been listening to the walls themselves, her head tilted at different angles like a bird tracking sound. The buzzing goes everywhere, she said quietly, like spider webs made of sound. Maria returned from her reconnaissance mission, her face grave. 4 executives still in the building. Mr. Stern in his office, Miss Patterson from legal, Mr. Yamamoto from international relations. And she hesitated. Who? Noah prompted. Jim Hawthorne, your security chief. He's been in the security office all evening, watching monitors. Noah felt a chill. His head of security, the man who'd dismissed concerns about the phones, who'd been so quick to brush off any suspicion. Either Hawthorne was complicit, or he was spectacularly incompetent. Neither option was comforting. We need to map everything, Noah decided. Every tap, every transmitter, every compromised line. Harold, can you and Zoe work together? Use her. Hearing to find devices, your expertise to trace them? The old man looked at the child with newfound respect. I've worked with spectrum analyzers worth $50,000. But if she can really hear electronic interference, he smiled. Let's go hunting, little one. They worked through the night, a strange but effective partnership. Zoe would point to walls, ceilings, and floors where she heard the telltale buzz. Harold would investigate, often finding devices in places no security sweep would think to check. Inside light fixtures, behind electrical outlets, even embedded in the decorative molding. Marcus, meanwhile, had made a disturbing discovery. The data transmissions started 6 months ago, but they're not constant. They spike during specific events, board meetings, strategy sessions, and he looked up, face pale. Every single call with the Japanese delegation. They knew about the merger from day one. How is that possible? Noah asked. We didn't even begin discussions until he stopped, remembering. 6 months ago, he'd had dinner with an old friend from Toyota who'd mentioned that Japanese manufacturers were looking for American partners. A casual conversation that had planted the seed for the merger. But who else had been at that restaurant? Sterling, he breathed. David Sterling was at the bar that night. He must have heard us talking, realized what was coming, and set up. His surveillance network to steal the deal, Marcus concluded. But Mr. Carter, knowing about a potential merger and successfully sabotaging it, are two different things. What's his endgame? Before Noah could answer, Zoe made a sound of distress. She'd been examining the conference room with Harold, but now stood frozen by the main table, hands over her ears. "What is it?" Maria rushed to her daughter. "The sound is different here, louder, angry." Zoe pointed to the exact spot where Noah would sit tomorrow for the signing. "Something bad is here. Not just listening, something else." Harold immediately began examining the chair, the table, the floor beneath. His expression grew increasingly grim as he worked. Finally, he stood up, holding something in his palm. It was larger than the other devices, more complex. "This isn't just a bug," he said quietly. "It's a transmitter-receiver. It can send signals as well as receive them." "Send signals to what?" Noah asked, though he feared he already knew. Marcus had gone very still, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. "Mr. Carter, in my network analysis, I found something I didn't understand. Small programs dormant, embedded in various systems. I thought they were just remnants of old software. But if there's a transmitter that could activate them, they could destroy our entire digital infrastructure during the signing." Noah finished. "Make it look like a catastrophic system failure. The Japanese would walk away, our stock would crash, and Sterling would swoop in to buy the pieces." The magnitude of the plan took Noah's breath away. This wasn't just corporate espionage, it was corporate warfare, planned with military precision. "We need those programs isolated," Noah told Marcus. "Can you do it without alerting whoever's monitoring?" "Maybe, if I'm very careful, but it'll take time." "How much time?" Marcus glanced at his watch. 4 hours minimum, maybe 6. Noah checked his own watch. 2:17 a.m. The signing was at noon. They had less than 10 hours to neutralize a 6-month conspiracy. "There's something else," Harold said. He'd returned to his schematics, comparing them with the locations of the devices they'd found. "The pattern of installation. It's too perfect, too comprehensive. Someone didn't just have access to the building. They had detailed knowledge of our communication infrastructure, our security protocols, our vulnerable points." "An inside job," Maria said, what they were all thinking. "But who?" Noah ran through the possibilities. Who had the access, the knowledge, the opportunity? Who could have coordinated such an elaborate scheme without detection? Zoe, who had been quiet since her discovery, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Carter, can people's voices sound scared even when they're trying to sound normal?" "Yes, why?" "Because, Mr. Stern sounded scared earlier. But there's someone else who sounds scared all the time. The security man, Mr. Hawthorne. Whenever he talks, there's a shaky sound underneath, like he's always worried someone is listening." Someone is listening. Noah felt the pieces clicking into place. What if Hawthorne wasn't complicit, but compromised? What if he'd discovered the surveillance, but couldn't report it, because they have something on him? Noah said. Sterling's people must have leverage on Hawthorne. That's why he dismisses concerns. He's been ordered to. He knows about the bugs, but can't do anything without exposing whatever they're holding over him. It was a theory, but it fit the facts. And it meant they might have an ally in the security office, albeit an unwilling one. We need to be smarter about this, Noah decided. Sterling expects us to be blind, to walk into his trap tomorrow. But now we know about the surveillance, the programs, the transmitter. We can use that knowledge. How? Marcus asked. Noah looked at his unlikely team, the janitor, the child, the IT rebel, the old technician. David Sterling had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed the people who really ran Carter Industries were the ones with corner offices and expense accounts. He'd never considered that the real power might lie with the people who cleaned those offices, maintained those systems, and heard what others couldn't. We're going to feed him exactly what he expects to hear, Noah said. And while he's listening to that, we're going to save this company. The plan that formed in Noah's mind was audacious, risky, and depended on the skills of people the corporate world usually ignored. It was, in other words, exactly the kind of plan that had built Carter Industries in the first place. "Let's get to work," he said. "We have a trap to spring." The security badge records told a story Noah didn't want to read. Marcus had pulled up 6 months of access logs, displaying them on his laptop screen in damning detail. One name appeared repeatedly during off hours, accessing floors and rooms that should have been off limits, always when the security cameras were conveniently offline. For maintenance. Richard Stern, his CFO. His friend. Noah stared at the data, feeling something cold and heavy settle in his chest. 15 years ago, Richard had been a struggling accountant with a sick wife and mounting medical bills. Noah had hired him partly out of competence, partly out of compassion. Together, they built Carter Industries from a mid-sized company to a manufacturing powerhouse. Richard had been there for every triumph, every setback, every critical decision. "The access patterns are deliberate," Marcus said quietly. He knew exactly when the cameras would be down, exactly which routes to take. This wasn't opportunistic. It was planned. Harold had found more evidence. These devices, they're high-end, professional grade, cost maybe $30,000 for the whole setup. The purchase orders. He pulled out a crumpled paper from his toolbox. "I keep copies of everything. Look, authorized by R. Stern, buried in a maintenance equipment order, listed as communication system upgrades." Noah felt Maria's sympathetic gaze. Even Zoe had stopped drawing, sensing the weight of the moment. Betrayal was a special kind of pain, worse than any business loss. It struck at the foundation of everything. You believed about trust and loyalty. "We need to know why," Noah said finally. "Marcus, can you check Richard's financial records? Carefully, without triggering any alerts?" "Already did." Marcus pulled up another screen. 6 months ago, Mr. Stern refinanced his house. Twice. His daughter was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition. Treatment costs run about $80,000 a month. Insurance covers some, but the picture became clearer. Richard, drowning in medical debt, desperate to save his daughter. Enter David Sterling with an offer. Help bug Carter Industries, and those medical bills disappear. It was elegant in its cruelty. Sterling had found the one pressure point that would make an honest man turn traitor. "He's still in the building," Maria reported. "His office light is on." Noah made a decision that went against every instinct. "I need to talk to him." "That's dangerous," Marcus protested. "If he alerts Sterling, he won't." Noah was certain of this, though he couldn't say why. He's scared, remember? Zoe heard it in his voice. Scared men don't make good conspirators. They make mistakes. He found Richard exactly where Maria had, sighed, hunched over his desk, surrounded by financial projections for tomorrow's merger. The office smelled of cold coffee and desperation. Richard looked up as Noah entered, and for a moment his carefully maintained mask slipped. Fear, guilt, and exhaustion played across his features before he reassembled his professional expression. "Noah, couldn't sleep either? Big day tomorrow." "Cut the act, Richard." The words hung in the air between them. Richard's hands stilled on his keyboard. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "How did you find out? Does it matter?" Noah closed the door behind him, engaging the privacy lock. "I know about the bugs. I know about Sterling. I know about your daughter." Richard's composure crumbled. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. "I didn't have a choice. Emma, she's dying, Noah. 13 years old and dying. The treatments in Switzerland are her only chance, but the cost Sterling offered to pay for everything. All I had to do was provide access, authorize some purchases. I told myself it was just information, just business intelligence that companies gather all the time. You told yourself a lot of things, I'm sure. Noah's anger warred with pity. But you knew what Sterling would do with that information. You knew he'd destroy the company, put 1,200 people out of work. I know. Richard's voice cracked. You think I don't lie awake every night thinking about it? But what would you do, Noah? If it was your child's life against strangers' jobs, what would you choose? Noah didn't answer because he honestly didn't know. He'd built his life on clear moral principles, but he'd never been tested like this. Never had to weigh his integrity against a child's life. It got worse, Richard continued. Once I was in, Sterling owned me. The demands escalated. First just access, then active participation. Installing devices, altering records. He has recordings. Of me, evidence that would destroy me. Even if Emma, he couldn't finish. Tomorrow, Noah said. What happens tomorrow? Richard looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. During the signing, a signal will activate programs throughout our system. Everything will crash: financial records, manufacturing, controls, even safety systems. It'll look like a massive cyber attack or catastrophic failure. The Japanese will run, our stock will crater, and Sterling will make a lowball offer to save the company. The board will have no choice but to accept. And then he guts us, sells off the profitable divisions, closes the factories, liquidates the assets. Carter Industries ceases to exist except as a line item on Apex Corporation's balance sheet. Richard laughed bitterly. He even told me he'd keep me on as CFO of the stripped subsidiary. Like I'd want to oversee the corpse of everything we built. Noah pulled out a chair and sat across from his old friend. How long does Emma have without the treatment? 6 months. Maybe less. And with it, 70% chance of full remission. She could live a normal life, Noah. Graduate high school, go to college, have a family of her own. Richard's voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. But I couldn't watch her die, knowing I could have saved her. Noah understood then why Richard was still in the office at 3 a.m, reviewing merger documents for a deal he knew would never close. It was penance, or perhaps just the inability to let go of what they'd built together. What if I told you there was another way? Noah asked. Richard's head snapped up. What do you mean? We know about the bugs, the programs, the plan. We have a team working to neutralize the threat, but we need your help. Sterling will destroy me. The evidence he has will be worthless if he's in federal prison for corporate espionage. Noah leaned forward. Help us, Richard. Help us save the company and put Sterling away. And I'll make sure Emma gets her treatment. You'd do that after what I've done? You're not the villain here, Richard. You're a desperate father who got caught in a trap. Sterling is the one who weaponized your daughter's illness. Noah's voice hardened. And that's a line that should never be crossed. For a long moment, Richard was silent. Then, slowly, he nodded. What do you need me to do? First, tell me everything. Every detail of Sterling's plan, every person involved, every contingency. Then, we're going to use their own surveillance network against them. Richard's confession took an hour. The scope of Sterling's operation was breathtaking. He'd compromised not just Carter Industries, but 2 other companies he'd subsequently acquired. It was a proven playbook. Identify a target, find pressure points among key employees, install comprehensive surveillance, then trigger a crisis that made acquisition inevitable. There's a man named Victor Kozlov, Richard said. XKGB, now Corporate Intelligence. He designed the whole system. He'll be monitoring everything tomorrow, ready to trigger the programs the moment the signing begins. From where? A van in the parking garage. Mobile command center. Looks like a cleaning company vehicle. He likes to be close when a plan executes. Noah smiled grimly. Then we'll give him a show he won't forget. They returned to the maintenance room where the rest of the team waited. Zoe had fallen asleep on a makeshift bed of cleaning cloths, her purple notebook clutched to her chest. Maria looked up anxiously as they entered. "It's okay," Noah told her. "Richard's with us now." The CFO faced his unlikely colleagues, people he'd passed in hallways for years without really seeing. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I put everyone at risk. I have no excuse except that sometimes fear makes us do terrible things." Harold studied him with eyes that had seen decades of human frailty. "We all make mistakes, son. Question is what you do after." Marcus was less forgiving but pragmatic. "If you're really with us, I need your administrator access. There are financial subsystems I can't reach from my level." Richard provided his credentials without hesitation. As Marcus worked, Noah outlined their counter-strategy. It was risky, dependent on split-second timing and the element of surprise. But it had one major advantage: Sterling's arrogance. He believed his plan was perfect, his surveillance complete. He'd never suspect that the night shift, the invisible people had discovered his scheme. "We'll need everyone tomorrow," Noah said. "Marcus, can you create false data streams that mimic normal activity while you disable the hidden programs?" "Already working on it. But I'll need to be in the server room when the signing starts." "Harold, I need you to physically disconnect the transmitter at exactly the right moment. Too early, and they'll know something's wrong. Too late, and the programs activate." "I've got steadier hands than surgeons half my age," Harold assured him. "Maria, you and Zoe will be our early warning system. Zoe can hear if any new devices go active. And Richard," Noah turned to his CFO, "you'll need to give the performance of your life. Act normal, stressed about the merger, but nothing else." "Can you do that?" Richard nodded. "I've been acting for 6 months. One more day won't kill me." As dawn began to break through the basement windows, Noah looked at his assembled team. A janitor, a child with extraordinary hearing, a rebellious IT worker, a retired technician, and a compromised executive. Not the army anyone would choose to save a company, but perhaps exactly the army needed. "Get some rest," he told them. "In 7 hours, we go to war." As they dispersed, Zoe stirred and opened her eyes. She looked directly at Noah with that unsettling clarity children sometimes possess. "Mr. Carter, the bad men don't know about us, do they? About what we can do?" "No," Noah assured her. "They don't know about you at all." She smiled sleepily. "Good. Mama always says the best way to win is to be invisible until you're not." Out of the mouths of babes, Noah thought again. In a few hours, David Sterling would learn just how visible the invisible could become. The war room at 7 in the morning looked nothing like a war room. It was still Harold's maintenance closet, cramped and smelling of industrial cleaner, but Marcus had transformed it into a nerve center. Multiple laptops showed data streams, security feeds, and system monitors. Empty coffee cups testified to the night's work, and in the corner, Maria had created a small nest where Zoe could rest between listening sessions. "All right," Marcus announced, pulling up a complex diagram. On his main screen, "Here's what I've built. 37 shadow programs, each mimicking normal system behavior. When Sterling's people check their surveillance, they'll see exactly what they expect: normal pre-merger activity, elevated stress levels, typical communication patterns. Meanwhile," Noah prompted, "meanwhile, I'll be in the server room systematically, disabling their malware. It's like defusing 37 bombs while juggling. If I miss even one, or if they detect what I'm doing." He didn't need to finish. Richard had spent the early morning hours in his office, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Now he looked haggard but determined. "I've sent Sterling's people my usual status reports. Financial projections, last-minute concerns, everything they'd expect from a nervous CFO. I also mentioned that I'd be in the conference room early to review documents. Good, Noah said. They need to believe everything is proceeding as planned. Harold? The old technician held up a pair of wire cutters. At 11:58, I'll be in position. The transmitter has a battery backup, so I'll need to sever 3 connections. In sequence. Should take me 40 seconds if my arthritis doesn't act up. It won't, Harold said firmly. Flexing his fingers, Noah turned to Maria and Zoe. The little girl had been quiet all morning, her notebook filled with new sound patterns she detected. What are you hearing, Zoe? They turned on more listeners. This morning, she reported. In the lobby, the elevator, even the bathroom. They want to hear everything today. Let them, Noah said. The more they think they know, the better. He pulled out a paper old-fashioned writing, no digital trail, and sketched out the timeline. A Japanese delegation arrives at 11:30. We'll do the usual greeting ceremony, the tour of the facilities. That gives us cover for people to be moving around the building. At 11:45, we'll enter the conference room for final discussions. The signing is scheduled for noon exactly. That's when they'll trigger the attack, Richard confirmed. Kozlov likes symbolism, destroying the company at the moment of its greatest triumph. Instead, Noah continued, here's what will really happen. At 11:55, I'll receive an urgent call that requires me to step out briefly. That's your signal. Marcus, begin disabling the programs. Harold, you start your approach to the transmitter. At 11:58, Richard, you'll suggest we delay the signing by 5 minutes due to my absence. The Japanese appreciate precision, they'll agree. What about the FBI? Maria asked. Shouldn't we have called them by now? With what evidence? Devices that Sterling's lawyer will claim we planted? Testimony from a CFO who admittedly took bribes? Noah shook his head. We need them caught in the act. That's why at 12:02, when Sterling's people realize their plan has failed, they'll do something desperate. That's when we'll have real evidence. The plan had dozens of moving parts, any of which could fail catastrophically. But Noah had built his company by taking calculated risks, and this was the biggest calculation of his life. At 9 o'clock, they dispersed to their positions. Noah returned to his office, making a show of nervous energy for anyone watching. He called department heads, reviewed documents, paced by the windows, all the behaviors of a CEO on the verge of his biggest deal. At 10, he took a planned call from the Japanese delegation, confirming their arrival time. The conversation was formal, precise, exactly what Sterling's listeners expected to hear. But Zoe, sitting quietly in the corner with her mother, gave him a thumbs up. No new surveillance detected on his cleaned phone line. At 10:30, the decoy files went live. Marcus had created an entire false data environment, a digital puppet show that showed Carter Industries preparing for a normal signing. Anyone monitoring their systems would see routine activity, unaware that beneath the surface, a very different preparation was underway. At 11, Noah made his rounds of the executive floor. He stopped by Richard's office, where they performed a scripted conversation about last-minute details. He checked with legal, with international relations, with every department that Sterling would expect him to consult. All the while, his real team worked in the shadows. At 11:15, Jim Hawthorne approached Noah in the hallway. The security chief looked terrible, stress etched in every line of his face. Mr. Carter, he said formally, loudly. Then, very quietly, I know, I'm sorry. They have my son. Noah kept his expression neutral. Another piece of the puzzle. Sterling hadn't just compromised Richard. He'd trapped multiple employees through their vulnerabilities. Follow the plan, Noah murmured. By tonight, your son will be safe. At 11:25, a text from Marcus. Packages identified. Ready to neutralize. At 11:28, Harold's voice crackled through a secure walkie-talkie. In position, waiting for green light. At 11:30, exactly on schedule, 3 Blacktown cars pulled up to Carter Industries' main entrance. The Japanese delegation had arrived. Noah straightened his tie, put on his game face, and went to meet them. Behind him, scattered throughout the shoe, building his invisible army prepared for battle. The greeting ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Noah introduced the delegation to his executive team, including a nervous-looking Richard, who played his part perfectly. They toured the main manufacturing floor, where workers had been briefed to look busy but optimistic. Every word, every gesture was performed for Sterling's surveillance dot in the maintenance tunnels. Harold waited with the patience of a man who'd spent decades in cramped spaces. His arthritis was acting up. It always did on damp mornings. His hands remained steady dot in the server room. Marcus typed furiously, navigating through layers of code like a digital surgeon. Each hidden program had to be isolated, analyzed, and neutralized without triggering alerts. Sweat dripped onto his keyboard, despite the room's frigid air conditioning dot in the executive break room. Maria cleaned surfaces that were already spotless, while Zoe listened to the building's electronic heartbeat. The girl suddenly stiffened. Mama, something new, a different buzz. From outside, Maria keyed her walkie-talkie. Zoe hears something. New. External source. Noah received the message through his earpiece, just as he was explaining Carter Industries' quality control processes to Mr. Yamamoto. Kozlov was getting nervous, probably running additional scans. They were running out of time dot at 11:45. The group entered the conference room. Noah took his seat at the head of the table, directly over the transmitter that could destroy his company. The Japanese delegates arranged themselves with practiced precision. Richard sat to Noah's right, fingers drumming nervously on his portfolio. Gentlemen, Noah began, before we proceed with the signing, I'd like to review the key points one final time. As he spoke, his mind tracked the countdown. 10 minutes until Marcus began. 12 until Harold cut the transmitter. 13 until. They learned whether David Sterling's web would catch them all dot through the conference room's glass walls. He could see Maria pushing her cleaning cart past the elevator. Inside, hidden beneath cleaning supplies, Zoe continued her vigilant listening. The smallest soldier in their army, armed with nothing but extraordinary hearing and unshakable courage dot at 11:53. Noah's clean phone buzzed. He glanced at it apologetically. Gentlemen, I apologize. This appears to be urgent. Perhaps we could take a 5-minute break? Mr. Yamamoto nodded graciously. Of course, Carter-san. We shall review the documents once more. Noah stepped out of the conference room, and the real battle began. 24 hours. That's all they had when the morning sun rose over Carter Industries, painting the glass towers in shades of gold and shadow. But now, with the Japanese delegation in the conference room and Sterling's trap ready to spring, those hours had compressed to minutes. Noah stood in the hallway outside the conference room, phone pressed to his ear in a pantomime of an urgent call. Through his earpiece, he heard Marcus's strained voice. First program disabled, 36 to go. They're more complex than I thought. Each one's designed to trigger the others if tampered with. In the parking garage, Viktor Kozlov sat in his disguised van, monitoring dozens of data streams. The former KGB operative had run similar operations in Moscow, Beijing, and London. This should have been routine, another American company falling to superior intelligence work. But something felt wrong. The patterns were too perfect, the stress levels too predictable. After 20 years in the business, Kozlov had learned to trust his instincts. He activated his secure phone. Mr. Sterling, we may have a problem. David Sterling's voice was cold, clipped. Define problem. The data seems orchestrated, as if they know they're being watched. Impossible. We own their security chief, their CFO. If anyone suspected, we'd know. But Kozlov was already running secondary scans, and what he found made his blood chill. Sir, someone's in their server room. Not standard maintenance someone with high-level access. Stop them. I can't from here. But I can accelerate the timeline. Trigger the programs now, before they can do it. In the server room, Marcus. Saw the attack beginning. Programs that should have remained dormant until noon were activating early, reaching out like digital tentacles to destroy Carter Industries' infrastructure. They know, he shouted into his com. They're triggering early. Noah's mind raced. They'd planned for noon, not 11:56. Harold wasn't in position. The FBI wasn't ready. Everything was falling apart. Then Zoe's voice crackled through the comm, high and clear. Mr. Carter, the bad sound is getting louder. It's angry, the bad sound. The transmitter in the conference room, preparing to send its destructive signal. But if Zoe could hear it ramping up, Harold, Noah commanded, forget the timeline. Cut it now. I'm 30 seconds away. Run. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Noah saw Richard's eyes widen. The CFO could see the fear in Noah's face, knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. To his credit, Richard didn't panic. Instead, he stood smoothly and addressed the Japanese delegation. Gentlemen, while Mr. Carter handles his urgent matter, perhaps I could show you our latest production statistics? He led them to the wall display, turning their backs to the conference table and the transmitter hidden beneath. Noah's chair that was building to a lethal electronic crescendo, Maria, abandoned all pretense of cleaning. She ran through the halls, pushing her cart like a battering ram, Zoe clinging to the side. They had to reach the server room, had to help Marcus before. The lights flickered. Throughout the building, computers began showing error messages. The attack had begun not in his van. Kozlov smiled. Even accelerated, the plan would work. In 60 seconds, Carter Industries would experience catastrophic system failure. The Japanese would flee, the stock would crash, and Sterling would have his prize. What Kozlov didn't know was that Harold Kowalski, 73 years old with hands gnarled by decades of work, could still move like the Army communications specialist. He'd been in Vietnam. The old technician burst into the transmitter room, wire cutters in hand, and dove for the hidden device, .first wire. Cut. The transmission faltered, .second wire. Cut. The signal weakened, .third wire. The door burst open. Jim Hawthorne stood there, gun drawn, face twisted with anguish. I can't let you do it. They have my son. Harold looked at the security chief, then at the third wire. Son, you're going to kill your boy anyway. That's what men like Sterling do. You don't know that. I've got grandchildren, Harold said calmly. You think I'd be here if I didn't understand? But stopping me won't save. Your son. Stopping them will. For a heartbeat, everything hung in balance. Ben Hawthorne's gun wavered and dropped. Do it. Harold cut the third wire dot in the server room. Marcus felt the attack patterns change. Without the transmitter to coordinate them, the programs were acting independently, easier to isolate and destroy. His fingers flew over the keyboard, digital antibodies fighting digital infection. But Sterling wasn't finished. If the electronic attack had failed, he'd pivot to physical destruction. Kozlov was already on his phone, activating backup plans, calling in resources that had nothing to do with computers and everything to do with violence. They're sending people, Richard said urgently, returning to the hallway. He'd left the Japanese delegation discussing production statistics, buying precious minutes. Sterling just texted me. He knows something's wrong. He's dispatching a team to destroy physical evidence and create a distraction. What kind of distraction? Noah asked. His answer came in the form of a fire alarm shrieking through the building. Then another. Then smoke, real smoke billowing from the manufacturing floor. They're trying to burn us out, Noah realized. Force an evacuation. Destroy. Evidence in the chaos. But Noah hadn't built his company by surrendering to chaos. Marcus, how much longer? 5 minutes. Maybe 10. You've got 3. Maria, get Zoe out of here. No, the little girl said firmly. I can help. The bad men make sounds when they move. I can hear where they are. And she could. As Sterling's team infiltrated the building, Zoe became an early warning system. 2 in the east stairwell, she reported. 3 coming through the loading dock. 1 in the elevator, no. He's getting off at the server floor. Noah coordinated the defense like a general. Hawthorne, freed from his coercion, used his security knowledge to lock down critical areas. Harold, despite his age, stationed himself at a critical junction box. If Sterling's men tried to physically cut power to the servers, they'd have to go through him. The Japanese delegation, to their immense credit, remained calm. Mr. Yamamoto approached Noah in the smoky hallway. Carter-san, it appears you are experiencing difficulties. Yes, sir. I apologize for... Do you require assistance? Noah stared at the elderly Japanese businessman. Sir, we have been in business for 80 years, Yamamoto said calmly. We have faced wars, earthquakes, economic collapse. We recognize when a company is under attack. So I ask again, do you require assistance? It was an offer Noah hadn't expected. The Japanese weren't just investors. They were potential allies. Communications, Noah said quickly. If you could contact the authorities, tell them what you're witnessing. Your word carries weight, mine doesn't. Yamamoto smiled and pulled out his phone. Within minutes, he was speaking to someone very senior in the FBI, describing in precise detail the corporate attack he was witnessing. The tide was turning. Marcus had disabled over half the malicious programs. The fires were being contained by the building's suppression systems. Sterling's infiltration team found themselves facing locked doors and dead-end corridors, guided into traps by a security chief who knew every inch of the building. But Kozlov had one last card to play. If he couldn't destroy Carter Industries, electronically or physically, he'd destroy Noah Carter personally. The van's surveillance equipment could be turned into a weapon broadcasting recordings that would seem to show Noah engaging in the very espionage he was fighting against. It was Zoe who heard it first. Mr. Carter, the van in the garage. It's making a new sound. Like it's getting ready to scream. A broadcast. Kozlov was preparing to flood the airwaves with disinformation, to muddy the waters so thoroughly that truth would become indistinguishable from lies. Noah made a decision that would have seemed insane 24 hours ago. He grabbed the building's PA microphone. Mr. Kozlov, I know you're listening. This is Noah Carter. You're a professional. So am I. Your operation has failed. In about 90 seconds, the FBI will surround your van. You can go down fighting, or you can make a deal. Silence. Then, through the speaker system, an accented voice. What kind of deal? Testify against Sterling. Full immunity. New identity if you need it. You're not the villain here. You're just the weapon. We both know who pulled the trigger. In his van, surrounded by millions of dollars of surveillance equipment, Victor Kozlov made a calculation. Sterling had resources, but he also had a habit of eliminating loose ends. The FBI had credibility and witness protection, and something in Carter's voice, not desperation, but determination, told him this American would keep his word. You have 60 seconds to convince me, Kozlov said. Noah spoke from the heart. About second chances, about choosing the future over the past, about the 1,200 families whose lives hung in the balance. It wasn't a speech he'd prepared, just the truth as he saw it. 50 seconds later, Victor Kozlov powered down his equipment and stepped out of the van with his hands raised, just as the first FBI vehicles screeched into the parking garage. The war was over. Now came the harder part, cleaning up the battlefield. The executive conference room looked like a crime scene, which Noah supposed It was. FBI technicians carefully extracted surveillance devices while others documented the evidence. The Japanese delegation sat calmly at one end of the table, having refused evacuation, insisting they would see this through to its conclusion. David Sterling arrived at 12:47 p.m., 17 minutes after the FBI had secured the building. He stepped out of his Mercedes with the confidence of a man who still believed he controlled the situation. His lawyers flanked him like bodyguards, their expressions neutral but alert. Noah watched from the window as Sterling approached the building. The man moved like a predator, smooth, assured, dangerous. Even now, with his plan in ruins, he radiated the certainty that he would find a way to win. "He's here," Noah announced to the room. Special Agent Martinez, who'd been leading the FBI response, looked up from her notes. "Remember, Mr. Carter, let him incriminate himself. We have Kozlov's testimony, but Sterling's own words will seal this." Zoe, who had refused to leave despite her mother's protests, sat quietly in the corner. "I'll listen for lies," she said simply. "Lies sound different than truth." Sterling entered the conference room like he owned it, which, in his mind, he probably already did. His gaze swept over the FBI agents with mild disdain before settling on Noah. "Noah," he said warmly, as if greeting an old friend. "I heard there was some trouble. Fire alarms?" "I came as soon as I could." "How thoughtful," Noah replied. "Though I'm surprised you knew to come here specifically." "The fire was on the manufacturing floor." Sterling's smile didn't waver. "Your security. Chief called me. Jim and I go way back. He thought I might be able to help." It was a good lie, delivered smoothly, but Hawthorne was in FBI custody, having already provided a full confession in exchange for his son's safe return. Noah let Sterling dig deeper. "Actually, David, your timing is perfect. We were just discussing corporate espionage." "Terrible thing," Sterling agreed. "It's getting so you can't trust anyone. Even long-time employees can be compromised. Speaking of which, where's Richard? I'd expected to see your CFO at such an important signing." Another probe, trying to determine how much. Noah knew. Richard was in another room, having already given his statement to the FBI. His daughter Emma was on her way to Switzerland for treatment, her expenses covered by a medical trust Noah had established that morning. "Richard's handling a financial matter," Noah said truthfully. "But let's talk about you, David, about Apex Corporation's acquisition strategy." Sterling's eyes narrowed slightly. "What about it?" 3 companies in 5 years. Each one experienced catastrophic system failures just before you acquired them. Quite a coincidence. "I prefer to call it opportunity," Sterling said. "When companies fail, someone has to pick up the pieces. It's the natural order of business. And if the failures aren't natural?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sterling's lawyers shifted uncomfortably, but their client remained perfectly still. "That's a serious accusation, Noah. I hope you have evidence to back it up." Agent Martinez stood up. "We do." For the first time, Sterling's composure cracked. His gaze flicked to the FBI agent, then back to Noah. "What is this?" "This," Noah said, "is the end of your game." Viktor Kozlov entered then, flanked by federal marshals. The Russian's presence hit Sterling like a physical blow. The 2 men stared at each other across the conference room, employer and employee, conspirator and betrayer. "Victor," Sterling said quietly, "I'm disappointed." "Disappointment is mutual," Kozlov replied. "You promise clean operations, minimal risk. This was neither. You were well compensated. Money is poor substitute for freedom." Kozlov turned to Agent Martinez. "I have additional recordings. Every instruction, every payment, every threat Mr. Sterling made. All documented." Sterling's lead attorney finally spoke. "My client doesn't know this man. Any alleged recordings would be fabrications. Zoe's voice piped up from the corner. That's a lie. His voice went high on doesn't know. People's voices do that when they lie. The room turned to stare at the 8-year-old girl. Sterling noticed her for the first time, and something like confusion crossed his features. Who was this child? Additionally, Agent Martinez said, "We have the testimony of Jim Hawthorne, Richard Stern, and 3 employees at your previous acquisition targets who've come forward. Your pattern of operation is well documented, Mr. Sterling." Sterling straightened his tie, a gesture Noah recognized as buying time to think. When he spoke again, his voice had changed harder, more dangerous. "You think you've won something. Here, Noah? You think stopping one acquisition changes anything? There are 100 men like me, 1,000. We're the future. Companies like yours, sentimental, soft, clinging to outdated notions of loyalty and community. You're dinosaurs. We're the meteor. Maybe, Noah said. But dinosaurs ruled the earth for millions of years. And some of them evolved into birds. They learned to fly. Sterling laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Poetic, but poetry doesn't pay dividends. Mr. Yamamoto, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, now stood. The elderly Japanese businessman commanded attention without raising his voice. "Mr. Sterling," he said formally, "I have built my company over 50 years. My father built for 30 years before me. We measure success not in quarters, but in generations. You speak of dinosaurs and meteors. I speak of foundations and legacies. Which of us do you think will be remembered?" Sterling had no answer to. That Agent Martinez stepped forward. "David Sterling, you're under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, conspiracy, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act." As she read him his rights, Sterling's expression never changed. Even in defeat, he maintained the cold arrogance of a man who believed the rules didn't apply to him. As the FBI led Sterling away, he paused at the door. "This isn't over, Noah. I have resources you can't imagine. The best lawyer's money can buy. I'll be out in a week." "Maybe," Noah conceded. "But your reputation won't. Every company you approach, every deal you try to make, they'll know what you did here. You've spent 20 years building a network of fear and greed. I spent one night building a network of trust and courage. Which do you think is stronger?" Sterling didn't answer. The federal marshals led him away, his lawyers trailing behind, already on their phones arranging bail and planning appeals. In the conference room, a strange quiet settled. The battle was won, but at a cost. Trust had been shattered, vulnerabilities exposed. It would take time to heal those wounds. "Mr. Carter," Agent Martinez said, "we'll need statements from everyone involved. This is going to be a long process. I understand. But first," Noah turned to Mr. Yamamoto and his delegation. "Gentlemen, I deeply apologize for what you've witnessed today. If you wish to withdraw from the merger, I completely understand." Yamamoto conferred quietly with his colleagues in Japanese. Zoe, listening intently, whispered to her mother, "They're saying Mr. Carter is honorable, that he fought with courage." Finally, Yamamoto spoke. "Carter-san, in our culture, we have a saying, 'The bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists.' Today, you showed the flexibility of bamboo and the strength of oak. We would be honored to complete our merger with Carter Industries." Noah felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They'd not only survived Sterling's attack, but emerged stronger. The merger would proceed. The jobs were safe. The company would endure. As the room began to empty, Noah found himself alone with Zoe and Maria. The little girl was drawing in her notebook again, but this time the patterns were smooth, peaceful. "The bad sounds are gone," she reported. "Everything sounds right again." "Thank you, Zoe," Noah said, kneeling to her level. "You saved my company. You saved all those jobs. How can I ever repay you? Zoe considered this seriously. Maybe you could make it so other kids like me can use their different abilities too. Not everyone hears like I do, but lots of kids have special ways of understanding things. They just need people to listen. Out of the mouths of babes, one more time. Noah made a mental note to establish a neurodiversity program at Carter Industries, recruiting people whose unique perspectives could see what others missed. It's a deal, he promised Dot as they prepared to leave. Maria paused. Mr. Carter? What you did for Richard's daughter, for Jin's son, that's why people like us will always fight for this company, because you see us as people, not just employees. Noah watched them go, the janitor and her extraordinary daughter who'd helped save an empire. In the end, Sterling had been wrong about everything. The future didn't belong to those who exploited weakness, but to those who recognized strength in unexpected places. The war was over. Tomorrow, the real work of rebuilding trust would begin. 6 weeks after David Sterling's arrest, Carter Industries felt like a different company. Not in its structure or mission, those remained unchanged, but in something deeper. The invisible walls between executive floors and maintenance tunnels had begun to crumble, replaced by a recognition that strength could come from any corner of the organization. Noah stood in the newly renovated conference room, watching contractors install the last of the security upgrades. Every surveillance device had been removed, every compromised system replaced. But the most important changes weren't technological. Mr. Carter? Marcus Chun knocked on the doorframe. He wore a suit now instead of his usual jeans and hoodie, having accepted the position of Chief Security Officer. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Thank you, Marcus. How are the new protocols working? Smoothly. We've implemented rotating security audits, and I've established a direct reporting system for any employee who notices anomalies. No more dismissing concerns because they come from the wrong people. It was one of many changes. Harold Kowalski had been brought on as a full-time security consultant, his decades of experience proving invaluable in identifying vulnerabilities that younger technicians missed. His first act had been to establish a mentorship program, pairing veteran workers with new hires to preserve institutional knowledge. The board meeting itself reflected the new Carter Industries. Alongside the usual executives sat representatives from every level of the company floor supervisors, maintenance staff, even Maria Gutierrez, who'd been elected by her peers to represent the night shift workers. Before we address regular business, Noah began, I want to update everyone on the Sterling situation. He's been denied bail, apparently. The judge considered him a flight risk after they discovered he'd been moving assets offshore. The trial is set for spring. What about the other companies he targeted? Asked Patricia Wong, the new head of legal. The FBI is investigating all of Apex Corporation's acquisitions. 3 CEOs have already come forward with similar stories of sabotage. Sterling's empire is unraveling. There was satisfaction in the room, but Noah tempered it with reality. He was right about one thing. There are others like him out there, which is why the changes we're implementing aren't just about preventing another Sterling. They're about building a company that's truly resilient. The meeting progressed through financial reports. The merger with Hato Corporation had exceeded all projections and operational updates. But the highlight came when Maria stood to present the night shift proposal. We've identified 17 employees across all shifts with special skills that aren't being utilized, she reported, consulting notes written in careful handwriting. Things like pattern recognition, unusual memory capabilities, or heightened sensory perception. We're proposing a program to identify and develop these talents. The Zoe Martinez Initiative, Noah added, smiling. Named after the young lady who showed us that the most valuable insights can come from the most unexpected sources. The board voted unanimously to fund the program. After the meeting, Noah found himself back in the break room where it had all started. Someone had installed a small plaque on the wall. In this room, Zoe Martinez heard what others couldn't and saved what others thought was lost. "She'd be embarrassed," Maria said, joining him. "She doesn't like attention." "How is she doing?" "Better. The school found a specialist who understands her sensory differences. She's learning to manage the overwhelming inputs. And she's teaching other kids with similar conditions." Maria smiled. "She tells them about the night she helped save a company. Most don't believe her." "She always have a place here," Noah said, "when she's ready. Though something tells me she'll do things none of us can imagine." Richard Stern appeared in the doorway. He'd returned to work after testifying in the Sterling case, but their relationship would never be quite the same. Trust, once broken, could be rebuilt but never restored to its original form. "Noah, the Japanese delegation is here for the quarterly review." "Thank you, Richard." They walked together toward the conference room, the silence between them speaking volumes. Finally, Richard spoke. "Emma's responding well to treatment. The doctors are optimistic." "I'm glad. I'll never be able to repay." "You don't need to." Noah cut him off. "We all have our pressure points. Sterling found yours. The measure of a man isn't whether he breaks, but whether he helps rebuild." In the conference room, Mr. Yamamoto greeted Noah warmly. The partnership had transformed both companies, creating innovations neither could have achieved alone. But Yamamoto had brought something else, a presentation about Carter Industries that had been circulating in Japanese business. "Circles. They call it the night shift miracle," Yamamoto explained, pulling up a presentation on his tablet. The story of how a janitor's daughter and a small team of overlooked employees saved a major corporation. It's being taught in business schools as an example of inclusive leadership. Noah felt uncomfortable with the attention, but Yamamoto wasn't finished. "My grandson is 8 years old, like Martinez-san's daughter. He has autism, sees patterns and numbers that others miss. Because of your story, his school is developing programs to nurture his gift rather than suppress it. You've started something, Carter-san, something that goes beyond business." That evening, Noah worked late. Old habits died hard. But now he wasn't alone. Throughout the building, the night shift went about their work with a new sense of purpose. They weren't invisible anymore. They were the eyes and ears of Carter Industries, valued partners in the company's success. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Zoe Martinez stood there with her mother, holding a new purple notebook. "Hi, Mr. Carter. Mama said I could show you my new sound pictures. I'd be honored." She opened the notebook to reveal complex patterns, more sophisticated than her earlier work. But these weren't surveillance devices or electronic interference. They were the sounds of a healthy building, computers humming normally, phones carrying legitimate conversations, the heartbeat of honest commerce. "Everything sounds right now," she said proudly. "No more bad sounds? Thanks to you." Zoe shook her head. "Thanks to all of us. That's what Mama says." Everyone did their part. As they left, Noah reflected on the journey. 6 weeks ago, he'd thought he was protecting his company from a corporate raider. Instead, he'd discovered that his company's greatest protection lay in the people he'd overlooked, the night shift workers, the maintenance staff, the janitor's daughter with extraordinary hearing. Sterling had called them dinosaurs, doomed to extinction. But he'd forgotten that evolution wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about adaptation, about finding strength in unexpected places, about building communities that could weather any storm. Carter Industries had evolved. And in that evolution, Noah had found not just a stronger company, but a deeper purpose. A merger had saved 1,200 jobs. The Zoe Martinez initiative would unlock potential in countless others. And somewhere out there, other companies were learning that true security came not from surveillance and fear, but from trust and inclusion. That the night shift continued its work, no longer invisible, but integral. And in her small apartment across town, Zoe Martinez fell asleep to the sound of a city humming with possibility. Her gift no longer a burden, but a bridge to a future where different abilities were celebrated rather than dismissed. The foundation had been rebuilt, stronger than before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Carter Industries would face them with the wisdom that its greatest assets walked through its doors at all hours, carrying mops and toolboxes and notebooks filled with sounds only they could hear. 1 year later, Noah Carter stood before an audience of business leaders at the National Manufacturing Summit. Behind him, a massive screen showed images from that fateful night, the maintenance room that became a war room, the conference table that had hidden a transmitter, the van in the parking garage that had nearly destroyed everything he'd built. They say crisis reveals character, Noah began, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. I learned that crisis also reveals blindness. For years, I walked past the people who would save my company without truly seeing them. It took an 8-year-old girl with extraordinary hearing to teach me how to listen. In the front row, Zoe Martinez sat with her mother, wearing a new purple dress chosen specially for the occasion. At 9 years old, she'd grown more confident, though she still carried her notebook everywhere. The sounds she documented now weren't threats, but innovations, ways to use acoustic signatures to detect manufacturing flaws, predict equipment failures, prevent accidents before they happened. The corporate raid attempted by David Sterling wasn't unique, Noah continued. What was unique was how we stopped it. Not through superior technology or legal maneuvering, but through the collective strength of people traditionally overlooked in corporate America. He clicked to the next slide, Marcus Chun demonstrating the new security protocols to a group of IT workers from various companies. The young man who'd once been labeled a troublemaker was now consulted by Fortune 500 firms on cybersecurity. Talk about diversity in business, but we often limit that conversation to the boardroom. Real diversity means recognizing that insight can come from any level of an organization. The janitor who notices patterns executives miss. The maintenance worker whose decades of experience reveal vulnerabilities no consultant would find. The child whose different way of perceiving the world becomes a superpower when properly channeled. Another slide. Harald Kowalski teaching a masterclass on infrastructure security, his weathered hands drawing diagrams that would save companies millions in prevented breaches. Sterling called us dinosaurs, Noah said, allowing himself a small smile. He said companies like ours were doomed to extinction. But he forgot that adaptation is about more than technology or financial engineering. It's about evolving our understanding of where strength really comes from. The presentation shifted to show Carter Industries' new headquarters, the same building, but transformed. Open collaboration spaces where executives and maintenance staff worked side by side. The Zoe Martinez Center for Neurodiversity, which had already identified and developed unique talents in dozens of employees. The Night Shift Command Center, which had become a model for inclusive operations management. Today, Carter Industries is stronger than ever, not because we defeated a corporate raider, but because that crisis taught us to see and value every member of our community. Our night shift workers aren't invisible anymore. They're integral. Our neurodiverse employees aren't challenges to be managed. They're assets to be developed. He paused, finding Maria and Zoe in the audience again. A year ago, a little girl heard something wrong in our phone lines. But more importantly, she heard something right in our future. The possibility that a company could be more than a machine for generating profits. It could be a community where every voice matters, where every perspective has value, where the smallest among us can make the biggest difference. The screen showed one final image, the transparent phone now sitting on Noah's desk, a daily reminder of the importance of transparency and the danger of hidden agendas. David Sterling is serving a 20-year sentence for corporate espionage and racketeering. His conviction sent shockwaves to the corporate rating community. But I don't consider his imprisonment our greatest victory. Our greatest victory is that we learn to listen. Noah clicked off the presentation and spoke directly to his audience. Each of you leads organizations with hidden strengths. There are people in your companies right now who see things you miss, hear things you can't, understand patterns that elude your best analysts. They might be working night shifts, cleaning offices, maintaining equipment. They might be considered too young, too old, too different. He thought of Richard Stern, who now ran Carter Industries' Employee Assistance Program, helping workers facing impossible choices between integrity and survival. Of Jim Hawthorne, who transformed corporate security by acknowledging that the greatest threats often came from exploiting human vulnerability rather than technological weakness. Find them, Noah urged. Listen to them. Value them. Because the next crisis your company faces, and there will be a next crisis, might be solved not by your board of directors or your executive team, but by someone you've walked past every day without seeing. The speech ended to sustained applause, but Noah barely heard it. He was watching Zoe, who was listening to something in the auditorium's acoustic patterns, already identifying improvements that could make the space more accessible for people with sensory differences. Later, at the reception, executives approached Noah with questions about implementing similar programs in their companies. He directed many of them to Maria, who'd become an advocate for night shift workers' rights and recognition. Her quiet strength and practical wisdom commanded respect from CEOs who might once have overlooked her entirely. Mr. Carter, a young entrepreneur, asked, "What's the most important lesson from your experience?" Noah considered the question, watching Zoe demonstrate her sound mapping technique to a group of fascinated engineers. That innovation isn't always about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about finally seeing what was always there. As the evening wound down, Noah found himself on the building's observation deck with his original team, Maria, Zoe, Marcus, Harold, and even Richard. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling like stars, each building containing its own hidden stories of overlooked potential. "You know what I hear?" Zoe asked, tilting her head toward the cityscape. "What's that?" Noah responded, "Possibilities, millions of them. In every building, on every floor. People with gifts no one's discovered yet." She smiled. "Maybe they just need someone to listen." Harold chuckled. "Out of the mouths of babes." "Not a babe anymore," Maria corrected proudly. "She's growing up." "But still teaching us," Marcus added. They stood together in comfortable silence, an unlikely family forged in crisis and strengthened by shared purpose. Below them, the night shift of 100 companies went about their work. Invisible to many, but no longer to them. Noah thought about the transparent phone on his desk, about the plaque in the break room, about the changes that had rippled out from one night of corporate warfare. David Sterling had been wrong about everything, but most of all about what made a company strong. It wasn't the ability to exploit weakness or manipulate systems. It wasn't financial engineering or technological superiority. It was the simple recognition that every person in an organization had value, that the smallest voice could carry the biggest truth, that sometimes the best way to secure a company was to make it transparent enough for everyone to protect. "Same time next year?" Harold asked as they prepared to leave. "Wouldn't miss it," Noah confirmed. As they dispersed to their various lives, Zoe to her advanced acoustic studies, Marcus to his security consulting, Harold to his mentorship programs, Maria to her advocacy work. Noah remained on the deck. A moment longer. The lesson had been learned, but it was one that required daily practice. Every morning, he tried to see his company with fresh eyes, to hear it with Zoe's attention to hidden sounds, to value it with Maria's fierce protectiveness, to guard it with Marcus's vigilance, to understand it with Harold's accumulated wisdom. Carter Industries had survived a corporate invasion, not through strength, but through community. And in that community, Noah had discovered something David Sterling would never understand. That true power came not from what you could take, but from what you could build together. The night shift continued below, keeping the city's heart beating, and somewhere in the darkness, other little girls and boys with extraordinary gifts waited to be heard, their abilities dismissed as disabilities, their insights overlooked as oddities. But not at Carter Industries. Not anymore. The smallest voice had made the biggest difference. And that, Noah knew as he headed home, was a lesson worth more than any merger, any profit, any corporate victory. It was the sound of the future, and it was beautiful.